Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to talk about array data structure, and I will teach you how to work with arrays in C#. The best way to learn programming is through practical examples. So in this video, we are going to build an application together, and that application is going to help us to track the calories that we are eating so that we can calculate if we are gaining weight or losing weight. This is beginner-friendly video, so even if you don't know anything about arrays, this video is for you. So let's go straight to the point and let's start building our application. The first thing that you need to understand is the difference between a regular simple variable and an array. So inside a regular normal variable, you can store just one value, but inside an array, you can store multiple values. So if you create an array of 2 elements, you can store 2 values. If you create an array of 5 elements, you can store 5 values inside that array. So my idea is to create an array that can hold 7 decimal numbers. So one number for each day of the week, and inside each element of that array, we are going to enter how many calories we have eaten for that day. So let's see how we can do that. So if I say here, decimal, weekly calories, here I have created just one regular normal variable of type decimal, and inside it I can store just one value. But if you want to create an array, what you need to do is here after the type you need to put these square brackets. And by doing this, what we have done is we have created an array of decimal numbers called weekly calories. So inside this array, we can put multiple values, but all of those values need to be of this type here. So all of them need to be decimal numbers. They can also be integers because our compiler knows how to convert integer numbers into decimal numbers. For example, 5 is the same as 5.0, so that is going to be okay. But what will not be okay is to put characters, strings, or some other types inside this array here. So only decimal numbers. So now the question is, how can you put elements into this array here? There are different ways to do that. There are different ways to initialize this array. And in this video, I'm going to show you 3 most important and 3 most common ways to do that. Now, before we go any further, if you like my teaching style and if you like learning from my YouTube videos, then you can definitely learn a lot more from my practical programming course. You can find it on this site here, CodeBeautyacademy.com. So what is the difference between my YouTube videos and my practical programming course? The difference is that in my practical programming course in CodeBeauty Academy, you will get everything that you need in order to learn programming and start a successful career as a software developer as soon as possible. So we are going to work on real projects. You will get all of the video lessons, tasks, exercises, code, and my personal mentorship and help so that you can get your first job as a software developer in just a few months. This is only for people who are serious about learning programming and who really want to invest their time now in order to learn programming so that they can later see the benefits of their work. A lot of students who used to watch my YouTube videos and then they decided to join the academy, they were able to find their first job in just 3 or 4 months. And you can also be one of them if you are willing to work hard. And in case that you start the course, but you don't like it for any reason, just send an email in the first 7 days and you will get all of your money back. No questions asked. So instead of coming up with excuses, use the discount code that I will leave in the description and learn programming, because I promise you it is the best thing that you can do for your future. So let's continue with the video and let's talk about different ways to initialize this array. So as we said, inside an array, we can put multiple values. So now the question is, how can we do that? Well, you can initialize this array like this. You use these curly brackets, and then inside these curly brackets, you will specify all of the values for each element of the array. Now, this array is called weekly calories. So my idea is to have 7 elements, so 1 for each day of the week. And in those elements, we will enter how many calories we have eaten for each day of the week. So let's say that on Monday, we started tracking calories and how much we eat. So we consumed 2,500 calories according to plan, according to our diet and our needs. And then Tuesday was the same again. And then let's say that on Wednesday was someone's birthday, so we ate a bit more. So let's say, for example, 2,850, okay. And then Thursday we are back on track, let's say 2,550, okay. And then Friday was maybe night out, we had a dinner out, so let's say 3,050, okay. And then Saturday was good and Sunday was cheat day, so let's say 3,100. So this here is our calorie consumption for the week. So each element of this array represents how many calories we have eaten that day. And this is one way in order to initialize the array. So you use these curly brackets in order to say that you will initialize the array, and then you specify all of the elements of the array, but you need to separate them with this comma sign. And this array here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elements. So each day is one element, and each element represents how many calories we have eaten in that day. So this is one way to initialize your array. And something important that I said is that all of these elements of the array need to be decimal numbers or integer numbers, because your computer knows how to convert integer number into decimal number. But what you cannot do is, for example, you cannot have here a string, because as you can see, immediately you get this red squiggly which says, hey, this is string and I don't know how to convert it to decimal. So once more, they all need to be decimal numbers. Now, something that I would like to change here is the following. Here we are hard coding the values for each element of the array. But what we want to do is we want to be able to ask our user, hey, how many calories have you eaten in the first day? How many have you eaten for the second day, third day, and so on? So that would be another way, second way to initialize this array. And in order to be able to do that, we need to access each element of this array individually and set the value for that element. So now the question is, how can we do that? So in order to put the values that our user enters inside each one of these elements of the array, we need to be able to access them. And we access these elements with the help of their index. So what does that mean? Well, each one of these elements of the array has its own index, and those indexes start from 0, which means that this first element has the index of 0, and then the second element has the index of 1, and then third element has the index 2, and then 3, 4, 5, and 6, which means that an array that has 7 elements, its indexes go from 0 to 6. And that is why it is often said that developers start counting from 0, because the indexation of the array starts from 0 as well. So now that we know that each element of the array has its own index, the question is, how can we use that index in order to access a specific element? So for example, how can we access this first element of the array? Well, we can do that by using the name of the array and then the index. So here I will say weekly calories, and then inside these squared brackets, I will put the index. So by doing this, I am accessing the element of this array that has index 0. So that means the first element. And now I can work with this first element. I can read its value, I can put some value inside it, or I can perform some calculation, and so on. And what we want to do is, inside this first element of the array, we want to put the value that our user types into the console. So I will simply say this first element of the array will be equal to console.readline, like this. Now, because this input here will be in string format, what I need to do is I need to convert it into decimal. So I will simply say decimal.parse, and then whatever the user has typed into the console, I will simply parse or convert that into decimal number, and then I will store that decimal number as the first element of my array. So let's add one more thing before we start the application. So here I will say console.writeLine. So I will write a message for my user. I will say calories for day 1. Okay, so after I write this message, I will expect my user to enter the calories for the first day. So let's start the app. Okay, and it says calories for day 1. And if I enter, for example, 2560, and I press enter, this value here, this 2560, will be stored as the value for the first day, as the value for the first element of our array. So now if we want to enter the values for these remaining 6 elements, we can copy this code, adjust it, and that way we can enter values for all of the elements of our array. So let's do that. Let's copy this code so that we can enter the value for the second element. So I will say calories for day 2, and then here I will say weekly calories of this element here. So the element that has index 1, that is second element. Okay, and then let's do this for the remaining 5 days of the week. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I will adjust now this output. So day 3, day 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then here we are going from 0. So 0, 1, 2, and then 3, 4, 5, and 6. So by doing this, we will be able to enter manually the values for each element of our array. And if I start the app, it will ask us to enter values for all 7 elements. So let's say 2500, and then 2600, 3000. Okay, and then day 7, like this. So here we have initialized our entire array and we have entered the values for all 7 elements. Now, since this array was already initialized with the values that we have hard-coded ourselves, what this code here does is that it will simply overwrite these values with the values that our user enters. So this line here is going to overwrite this value here, and then this line here is going to overwrite this value here, and so on. So now the question is this part here even necessary? Because as you can see, it is going to be overwritten. And the answer is no. This part here is not necessary. So we don't have to specify the values of the elements of the array when we create the array. What we can do instead is we can simply say, hey, I want to create an array, and it is going to be a new array of decimal numbers, and here inside these squared brackets we need to put how many elements the array will have. So here I will say 7. So I have created my array and I have said that I want new array of decimal numbers that will have 7 elements, but I'm still not providing the values for elements because I can do that part later. Okay, so this is another way to initialize your array. So you create it here and then later you initialize it with the values that your user enters. Okay, so I will delete this part. We don't need it anymore, and this is the code that remains. So once more, this is how you can access an element of the array by using the name of the array and then the index of that specific element. And by doing that, you can access any element of your array. Now, there is a problem with this code here. It works, it is okay, but it is very redundant, which means that we are repeating a lot of code unnecessarily. Here we have an array of 7 elements, and we have already written a lot of code, and we have repeated a lot of code as well. So imagine what would happen if the array had 100 elements or 1,000 or even 1 million elements. That's not a lot in the world of programming. In that case, we would have to repeat these 2 lines of code 1 million times. And in that case, our code would be completely unmanageable. So now you might ask, Saldina, is there a better way to do this? Is there a shorter and easier way to access all of the elements of the array? And the answer is yes. Yes, there is. So what we can do is we can use a loop in order to iterate through all of the elements of our array, and that way we can access each individual element and do whatever we want with that element. So if you're not familiar with loops, I am going to link a video here and also in the description, and you can watch that video in order to learn everything that you need to know about loops in programming. So let's see how we can do this with the help of for loop. I will say for, and then I will say int I is equal to 0. So I will start at the first element of my array, that is the element with index 0. And then I will say I is less than or equal to 6, because that is the index of the last element. So an array that has 7 elements, the indexes for that array start at 0, and then the last element has the index of 6, so from 0 to 6. And then in each iteration, I will increment that index by 1. So what I will do inside this for loop is these 2 lines of code. So I will say that I'm accessing the element with index of I. So that is the element of the current iteration. In the first iteration, I is going to be 0. So that will be the first element. In the second iteration, I is going to be 1. So that will be the second element, and so on. So in this line, I'm going to enter the value for that element of the array. And then I also want to adjust this message. So I will say calories for day. And then here I will simply print the value of I. And in order to be able to use I like this inside these curly brackets, I need to add this dollar symbol before my string. So what this dollar sign and then these curly brackets allow me to do is to use this I as a regular variable inside my string. And we have already talked about this in my video about all string methods and everything that you need to know about strings. So if you're not familiar with that, I'm going to link a video here and also in the description. And in that video, you will learn everything that you need to know about working with strings. So once more, if you're not familiar with this syntax, make sure to watch that video and everything will be clear. So I'm using this for loop in order to iterate through all of the elements of my array, from the element that has the index 0 to the element that has the index of 6. And for each element, I will print this message. So please enter calories for day and then the index of the current element of the current day. And then here I am simply reading the input that the user types into the console, and then I'm converting that into decimal and storing it as the value for that current element. And this code here does the same thing as all of this code here. So these 3 lines of code do the same thing as these, how many? 14 lines of code. So what I will do is I will comment out this code. And now when I start the application, we should see the same thing that we had when we started this code here. So let's start the app. Okay, so calories for day 0, let's say 2560 and then 2600, and then entering the values for the remaining elements. And then day 5, 2650, and day 6, 3000. Okay, so here I have entered the values for all of the elements of my array, but the code is much shorter and easier to understand and also easier to maintain. And we can use this code in order to iterate all of the elements of our array, regardless of how many elements the array has. And the only thing that we need to change is the index of the last element, because the first element always has the index of 0. So then if our array, for example, has 10 elements, the last index will be 9. If it has 100 elements, the last index will be 99. And then in our case, the array has 7 elements. So the last element has the index of 6. So in a very simple way, we can iterate an array that has 2 elements as well as an array that has 2 million elements, just with a simple short code that looks like this. Now, one small thing that I would like to change here is this output that is shown to the user. So here it says calories for day 0 and then calories for day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So here we are simply printing the index of the element. And for us developers, this makes sense. So day 0 is the first element, but for the end user, for someone who doesn't know about indexing and about programming, what he expects to see is the first element to say calories for day 1 and then second element to say calories for day 2 and so on. So what I will do is I will adjust this part here. So instead of printing the index, I will just increment it by 1 in order to show to our user what is natural to him. So now if I start the application, as you can see, it says calories for day 1, and then calories for day 2, and so on. So in the background, we are still using our indexes, and here we are using the index of the element to access that element. But for our user, we are just adjusting the output a little bit so that it is easier for him to understand and more natural to him, because normal people still count from 1 and not from 0 like us programmers do. Okay, so now that we have learned how we can initialize our array, how we can access each element of the array using the name of the array and then the index of the element, and also now that we have learned how to iterate through all of the elements of our array using for loop and to set the value, to enter the value for each element of the array, now let's see what we can do with this information. So let's delete this code because we don't need it anymore. And now what I want to do is I want to perform some calculations on the data that our user enters. So for example, let's calculate how many calories our user consumes on average. And in order to do that, we need to sum all of the individual days and then divide that by 7. So let's stop the application. And here I will create a variable of type decimal and I will call it, for example, total. Okay, initially total is going to be 0. So then what I will do is whenever the user enters value for a specific day, so whenever he enters calories for that day, I will simply add that to our total. So I will say total plus equals to the calories that our user has entered for that day, like this. So after this for loop is executed, we will have the values for each day, so how many calories he has consumed for each day, and then also inside this variable we will have the total number of calories that he has consumed. So then what I can do is I can find average by dividing this total by the number of days, which is 7. So let's calculate that here after our for loop. Let's create a variable of type decimal. I will call it average, or let's say average caloric intake so that it is easier to understand. So average cal intake, like this. So how do we calculate the average? Well, it's quite easy. We simply divide the total by the number of days. So total divided by 7, and that is going to give us average caloric intake per day. So let's print this average as a message. I will say console.writeLine, and here let's say your average caloric intake is, and here I want to print this value. So I will put it inside curly brackets, and in order to be able to use it like this, I need to add this $sign. Okay, and then at the end I need semicolon. So let's start the application. Okay, so calories for day 1, let's say 2500, and then 2600, 2750. Okay. And then let's say for the last day, we had really big cheat day. Your average caloric intake is 2750. So now the question is, what can we do with this information? Well, if we know how many calories we are consuming on average, and we also know how many calories we need, then we can calculate if we are gaining weight or if we are losing weight. Now, you can calculate how many calories you need on many sites on the internet, because that really depends on many things like your gender, your age, your height, how active you are, so if you work out or not, and so on. So you can find different sites on the internet that are going to tell you how many calories you need to consume. For me, that is 25 or 2600, so I will use that in our program, but you can adjust it and use number that is appropriate for you so that you can get information that is relevant for you as well. And if you don't want to calculate this right now, but you still want to know how many calories you need, well, it depends. If you are a girl, you probably need around 2000 calories, maybe a little less or a little more, depending on how tall you are and how active you are. And if you are a boy, if you are a man, then you probably need around maybe 2800 or 3000 calories, again, depending on how tall you are and how active you are. And if you are a really big man who works out a lot, then you already know how many calories you need. I don't have to tell you. So now let's write some code that is going to tell us if we are gaining weight or losing weight based on the data that our user enters and how many calories we consume on average, and also based on that information of how many calories you really need in order to maintain your weight. So let's create a variable here, for example. It will be of type decimal, and let's call it recommended caloric intake. So this is how many calories we need to consume per day in order to maintain our weight. So for me, that is, let's say, 2500 calories. So now we can use this value here and this value here in order to calculate and in order to determine if we are gaining weight or losing weight. So let's make a prediction. Let's say that we are interested to know what will happen in a year from now, so 365 days from now, if we continue consuming this many calories on average, and then this here is our recommended caloric intake. So what I will do is I will subtract these two values. I will say average caloric intake minus recommended caloric intake, and that will tell me on a daily basis if I'm consuming more or less and how much. And then I will multiply that by 365 days. So let's say decimal, and let's create a variable called annual caloric balance, like this, average minus recommended. So I will put this inside parentheses, and this here is going to tell me on a daily basis how many more or less calories I'm consuming, but one day is not going to change anything. But if I continue doing that for 365 days, which means for a year, then inside this variable here, we will see how many more or less calories we have consumed for that entire year. So now that I have that information, and I know, for example, that on average each day I have consumed 100 more calories than I need, on a daily basis that is nothing, it's not going to change anything, but for an entire year, if you continue doing that, that is going to be 100 multiplied by 365 days, so that is going to be 36,500 calories more than you should have consumed. So now the question is, how can we calculate how many kilograms this is? So how much weight we have either gained or lost based on this annual caloric balance? Well, it's simple. You just need to know that each kilogram of weight is equivalent to approximately 7,000 calories. So if you want to lose 1 kilogram, you need to lose 7,000 calories. And if you want to gain 1 kilogram, then you need to eat 7,000 calories more. So let's calculate that here. Let's say decimal weight change in kg. Okay, so weight change in kilograms will be equal to annual caloric balance divided by 7,000, like this. So inside this variable, we will have the information about how many kilograms we have either lost or gained. So let's print that information to our user. I will say here, this is your weight change in 1 year. Okay, and then let's print this value like this. Or even better, this will be your weight change in 1 year if you continue doing what you are doing currently. So let's start the program and let's see what the data says. Okay, so calories for day 1, let's say 2600, and then let's say 2450, and then third day I was okay. Again, I consumed as much as I needed. And then day 6 and day 7, let's say that I consumed a little bit more, so 2700 again. And now when I press enter, we will see what the data says. It says this will be your weight change in 1 year, and then 3.35. So in 1 year, if I continue doing this, I will gain 3.3 kilograms. And the reason for that is because on average, I'm consuming more calories than I need. And in 1 year, I will see the results of that work. I will see the consequences. So now the question is following. Let's say that we are creating a plan for ourselves because we want to lose some weight, and we want to use our program in order to see if our plan is going to work and how well it is going to work. So I will start this program again. And now what I want to do is I want to enter my plan. So let's say that I will lower my calories just a little bit. So I will eat, for example, 2300 calories instead of 2500, which is how much I need. So for 5 days of the week, I will be on that diet. So 2300 calories for the first 5 days of the week. And then on day 6 and on day 7, let's say that I will eat 2500 and then 2600 here. Okay, so these two are like a little cheat day. So now when I press enter, I will see the result of this plan. So this plan says that if I do this, if I follow this plan, in 1 year, I will lose 6.7 kilograms. Which is great because here I'm not starving myself. I'm just decreasing calories a little bit, but slowly and surely I am going towards my goal, which is to lose around 7 kilograms in a year. And if you want to lose even more weight, if you want to make a plan that is even more, let's say, strict, then you can use this program in order to calculate and predict what is going to happen. By the way, I don't recommend you to lose weight in an unhealthy way here. I'm just teaching you how to program and how to write code. I am not teaching you how to lose weight. By the way, if you want to see some of my workouts and if you want to see how I maintain all of this muscle, then you can follow me on Instagram because I publish a lot of my workouts there, a lot of stories from the gym, so that I can also motivate you to work out as well. This is my handle on Instagram, and I will also leave it in the description, so feel free to add me. I would be happy to see you there. So as I said, we can now adjust this program to give us different kind of information that we need. So for example, here is your recommended caloric intake. Let's say that you are a male who needs 3000 calories per day. Okay, and then you want to see what is going to happen in 3 months. So here you are going to calculate average caloric intake minus recommended caloric intake multiplied by 90 days, that is 3 months. And let's also change the name of this variable. Let's say 3-month cal balance. Like this. So you will simply divide this 3 months caloric balance by 7,000, and it is going to tell you what is going to happen in 90 days. So let's start the program, and let's say that you made a plan and your plan is to eat 500 calories less each day for the next 3 months. So you are wondering what is going to happen. So your recommended daily intake is 3,000 calories. So what you are going to do is you will eat 2,500 each day for the next 3 months, and you want to see what will happen. So 2,500, and then again Okay. And as you can see, in just 3 months, you will lose 6.5 kilograms. And you can also adjust this output here. So because we have changed our code so that now it works with 90 days, you can also change this part here. So this will be your weight change in 3 months. But this here is the result, and this here is what the data says. So you have learned how to do this in code, how to use programming and arrays in order to perform all of these calculations and make a perfect plan for yourself in order to either lose weight or gain weight. And that part is easy. Programming is the easy part. The hard part will be to actually follow this plan. But that is not up to me. I cannot teach you how to do that. What I can do is I can teach you programming. And if you want to learn practical programming, if you want to learn programming through practical examples and gain the experience that you need in order to get your first job and start a successful career as a software developer, then you can join CodeBeauty Academy. You can join my practical programming course. The link is going to be in the description. I am waiting for you there. And through the entire process, I'm going to be your mentor, and I will help you to achieve all of your goals and to do that in the shortest amount of time possible. As I said, there is a special discount that you can get as my YouTube viewer. I will leave a coupon code in the description, so definitely use this opportunity and finally learn programming with my help. So let's do a quick summary of what we have learned in this video. We have learned about arrays, and we have learned that an array is a collection of data. So inside an array, you can store one or more elements. Those elements need to be of the same type, so that is the type of the array. We have also learned how we can initialize an array in 3 different ways. How we can initialize an array when we first create it, using those curly brackets and separating elements with comma signs. Second way is how we can access each individual element of the array. And then third way was iterating through our array with the help of for loop like we are doing here, and then accessing each individual element and then doing whatever we want with that element. Here I am simply putting the value into the element, and then here I'm using it in order to perform calculation that I need. Arrays are used very often in programming, and they are super useful because they are very, very fast. Now, arrays have certain advantages and disadvantages when compared to some other data structures, but I will leave that part for some other video because this video is already getting too long. So if you're interested in this topic and if you want to learn more about arrays and you want to learn more about arrays versus other data structures or other data structures in general, let me know in the comment section and I will create those videos. And before I end this video, there is one more very important thing that I want to show you, and that is the most common error that happens when working with arrays, especially to beginners. And that would be index out of range or index out of bounds error. So how can you get that error? Well, you can get it if you are trying to access an element of the array that does not exist. And that can happen in the following situation. For example, here, if I said that I want to iterate from 0 to 7 instead of 6, let's see what will happen. So let's start the app, and here I will enter any values, it doesn't matter. Okay, and here it is asking me for calories for day 8. This is already suspicious, but if I enter a number here, as you can see, I get this exception. It says index was outside the bounds of the array. So this exception is called index out of range or index out of bounds, and it indicates that we are trying to access the element of our array which does not exist. Why it does not exist? Well, because here we are saying that our array has 7 elements. So that would be indexes from 0 to 6. And here we are clearly not doing that because here we are going from 0 to 7. And that is the reason why we are experiencing this error. So this is a very common error that happens to a lot of beginners, especially when you first start learning about arrays. So it is very important that you remember that indexes for an array start from 0, which means that the last element will not have index of 7 here, it will have index of 6. So if size of the array is 7, the last element is 6, and then if size is 100, the last index is 99, and so on. So in order to avoid this error, you need to remember this and be very, very careful. So now that you have learned about arrays in programming, you can use this knowledge in order to create different applications. For example, here we have created an application that is going to help us to lose or gain weight. But what I want to do is I want to give you also a task that you can do for homework in order to practice on your own and in order to create another useful application that will help you with saving money. So I want you to create the following application as homework. I want you to create an array where you are going to enter how much money you are saving each day for, let's say, 10 days. And then I want you to calculate based on that how much money you are saving on average daily. So once you have that information, you can calculate how much money you will have saved in, let's say, 1 year, so 365 days. So I want to give that task to you in order to solve on your own and practice. And if you manage to solve it, you can paste the code down below in the comments so that I can review it and so that other people can also see it and then give you some tips, advice, upgrade that code, and so on. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions or any topics that you would like to see in the future on this channel, let me know in the comment section. And then if you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up so that I know to create more videos like this one in the future. So once more, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in some other video. Bye bye.